to the Sleeper Wire Show. This is the second episode of the 2019 fantasy football season, and we have a great show for you guys today with a great guest. I'm your host, Professor Chris, once again, and with me today I have Dirty Jobs Mike. How's it going, man?
Hey, not too bad, not too bad. It's good to be back. Week 2 already, just counting down the weeks until that fantasy draft happens already.
I know, it's so far away, and we're not even done with this football season. And a special welcome to Justin Boone coming back to the Sleeper Wire Show. He's a writer for The Score. You can find him on Twitter at Justin Boone. Justin, is this the second or third time you've been on the show?
This is the second time. It's great to be back, and it's a great time of year, right? Like, not only for me, just because I'm not working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week like I am during the real fantasy season, but at this point in the year, we get a lot of time right now to take a look at what happened in 2018, to start to look ahead to 2019, and I think a lot of the people who are paying attention right now, who are, starting their notes, starting their research, are the people who are probably going to make it to the Fantasy Championship next season.
Sounds like someone's bragging.
I'm encouraging people to stick along, to listen to your podcast, to listen to my podcast, and make sure they're still paying attention January and February.
Amen.
Absolutely. How'd you do in the Sleeper Wire Pro-Am this year? You were in Prophet Hoose's league.
I was. I took it down. I won the title. I was probably been in a lot of fantasy leagues. I'm not saying this to brag. It was probably the best fantasy draft I've ever had. It seemed like I could do no wrong. I ended up with Hill and Mahomes and Kamara, Woods, just all these guys that went off this year, and I kind of just rolled through the league. I almost felt bad a couple times during the season. I was winning every week by like 30 points.
What'd you win the championship by? Do you remember?
I don't remember what the final score of the title was, but I think it was something like that. It was a pretty healthy margin. I don't think it was very close. One of the weeks I lost, and this might be good advice for listeners out there, it's something I've not done that many times in my fantasy career, but I had a lot of guys from the Chiefs and the Rams who were on bye the same week late in the season, so I ended up losing that week. That was my one bad week. I think I put up like 100 points, which was well off my season average. But every other week, I had this really lights-out roster going. So something I'm probably going to try moving forward more.
Yeah, pick the two best offenses that have the same bye.
It worked. It worked out this year. Yeah, might not work out every season. But.
Yeah, for sure. Mike, how'd you do in yours?
In my Pro-Am, I actually got tossed. I actually got the crap trophy in that one because I just kept getting dominated. Matt Harmon started it off, and then after that, my team just decided to stop playing football. I had like 12 injuries on that team. It was a mess. So I ended up finishing 12th in the 12-man.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's
it's rough.
And I finished second in mine. I just wanted to talk about the Pro-Am briefly because you were gracious enough to be in it, Justin, so we thank you for that.
And you guys did a great job putting it together. The app was fantastic. I was really impressed by the whole thing.
Yeah, we really like the Sleeper app. Good friends with those guys. We've had the CEO on the show a couple times. We really like what they're doing over there. And that platform is just awesome. All right, guys. Well, do you want to talk about some news here?
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. Not a whole lot, but we got a couple noteworthy things. There has been in Philly a whole lot of speculation recently about who the Eagles quarterback is going to be after Nick Foles has had so much success in the playoffs and, really the end of the regular season for the last 2 seasons. But Doug Peterson did confirm that Carson Wentz is the quarterback going forward. I don't think that's much of a surprise there. Justin, I don't think you do either, because when I was looking at your rankings, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit, you had Wentz ranked in the top 10, right?
Yes, absolutely. I really like Wentz next year. And I think you're going to get a big discount. You might want to call it the Nick Foles discount, because everyone's thinking about how well Foles played. And, recency bias. They're looking at Wentz this season. He played okay, but his numbers were nowhere near what they were last year. And if everybody remembers, and many people probably don't, but in that 2017 season, we know Wentz was an MVP candidate by the time he got hurt late in the year, right?
Absolutely.
He had the second most fantasy points among quarterbacks at that point in the season. He was fantastic. He was running the ball. He was throwing a ton of touchdowns, and that offense was rolling. Then he comes back from the ACL tear. Didn't really run much this year. So that his numbers were all lower. Fantasy numbers, obviously, for quarterbacks, when a quarterback's running the ball, it really helps boost their value. So I think when you're looking at next season, he's going to be further removed from that ACL tear. He's going to be back. I think they're going to get things right on that offense. We saw this year, they were sort of just trying to piece it together as they went. They made that Golden Tate trade. It didn't really work out. It almost threw off their offense for a big chunk of the middle of the season there. So I think next season, you're going to see Wentz running more. You're going to see that offense back in sync. And I really think he's going to be a top 5 quarterback next year. And I'm going to have him ranked close to that, if not in the top 5 going into next season.
Now, he did finish as even missing the last 3 games, he still finished as the quarterback 4 in 2017, didn't he?
He was up there. I want to say it was a little bit lower than that, but you might be right, I guess. If you have it in front of you, I don't know. But it was around that range for sure. Like, that's how well he was playing.
He was killing it. He was super good.
The one thing that I remember a lot about Carson Wentz is just how much he could move the ball, and you just did not see that this year. And I don't know if it was due to injury, but maybe apprehension due to injury. It just didn't seem like they threw him out there. And then once they sat him the rest of the season, I kind of got on board exactly where you're at. I mean, this guy is amazing. He's phenomenal. He moves the ball with his feet just as much as he does with his arm. Yeah, top 5 for sure, I think.
And when you look at that team right now, I'm sure they're going to address the position in the offseason. But right now, who's the running back on that team? I think next year, depending what they do there, they're probably going to draft somebody or maybe even bring in a bigger name free agent. I don't know that they're a franchise that's going to spend big at running back, but I'm sure they're going to address the position somehow. But still, that's going to put more onus on the passing game there. Just means more stats for Wentz.
Absolutely. Do you think Jay Ajayi is going to get that job back?
I believe Ajayi is a free agent this year, so I don't know if they're going to bring him back or not. And I think with him, what's going to be tough is he's coming off the injury as well. That's a tough injury to come back from. Timeline-wise, I think that's going to put him around the start of the season. I think that happened for him in October. So if you're looking at, the regular timeline, be a tough turnaround for him, or maybe he won't even be, full speed early in the year. So could be tough for him to get a job free agent-wise. Maybe the Eagles decide they don't want to bring him back. When they initially made that trade, I kind of felt like it was a rental. They were going to have him for a couple of years, then maybe let him go. Like I said, it's a very smart franchise, and I think they know with running backs, you could draft a guy, as we've seen so many times, in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, maybe even later, and have that guy come in and put up decent numbers for you. So I could see them doing that again. Also, I mean, Josh Adams wasn't terrible last year, but I think if you're going to bring him back, you need to bring in someone that's going to be able to help lift him. And we didn't really see that from Sproles or Smallwood or Clement this year.
Yeah, no one in that backfield really shined. No one ran away with the job.
And it was tough because I know in a couple leagues I spent some FOB dollars trying to get those guys when Ajayi went down, thinking, invest a little bit in Smallwood and Clement's got to be one of them, right? Turned out it was neither.
Yep, that's true. All right, let's move on. The Minnesota Vikings have hired Gary Kubiak as an offensive coordinator. This was a good move for them. The offense just really couldn't put it together last season at all, which is too bad. The offense looked nearly unstoppable after the first few weeks of the season. But honestly, I think that losing Tony Sparano over the summer just had a big blow to that team.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I haven't really taken that into much consideration, the Sparano thing and that happening. I think for them, in my mind, I mean, the offensive line was just really thin going into the season. And then they had a couple injuries early in the year, and they couldn't recover from that. And I think that really hurt them. They sort of, patched it together early in the season. But I think the addition of Kubiak, it's a good one. He is definitely good at, creating a running game. We've seen him do that on his resume several times in the past, even dating back to, the early 2000s when he was with the Broncos. Most recently, if you're looking at, what he's done as an OC, not sort of looking at just his head coaching work, but what he's actually done when he's been in more of an offensive role. And in 2014, he had a Ravens offense that they put up really good rushing stats. They were 8th in rushing yards, 7th in rushing touchdowns, and they were doing that with Justin Forsett as his lead back on that team. So I think we already saw Minnesota tip their hand later in the year. I think Zimmer wants to run the ball a lot there. I'm guessing that's a big reason why they brought Kubiak in to help design that run game. Maybe, sort of cover up some of those issues that they have on the offensive line. But I don't know if there's that much to see here. I think it's nice. I don't think it changes much, though, because I think regardless, the Vikings were going to come into this season and they were going to put more emphasis on running the ball like we saw them do late last year. Hopefully Dalvin Cook can stay healthy this time around. I think he's a phenomenal talent and a guy that also might go underdrafted this year just based on the fact that he dealt with injuries and people didn't see him put up a really big season. But he is a very talented back. And you have to think, if you look at the Vikings roster, top to bottom, offense and defense, what are they going to address in the offseason? It has to be offensive line, right? They need to spend their free agent money on offensive line. They need to spend their draft picks on offensive line. They have talent everywhere else on that team. So hopefully they can get some guys in there. And I mean, that would make Kubiak's job a lot easier and an assistant role. The only worry, I guess you could say, is, with him not being OC, could you eventually have some type of turmoil in the season where, the offense isn't going as well? Maybe there's sort of a push for Kubiak to take over and you end up having to fire someone in season again. Hopefully that's not the case, and I don't think that's the case. I think that team is just so stacked. They're going to have a good bounce back year, and we're going to see a lot from that rushing attack, in part thanks to Kubiak.
Let's preview this week for the playoffs. We have the conference championships this week. Let's start with the NFC Championship. The Rams at Saints play the earlier game on Sunday, the 3:05 Eastern. Mike, who do you think wins this game?
Man, the Saints really kind of showed some gusto, I guess is the word right there, when they came back and beat Philadelphia was just all over them. So I really feel like Saints kind of have it together. I feel like they have it together a little bit more than the Rams. I'm taking the Saints, and I'm thinking 34-28, something in that window.
You think the Saints can stop the great C.J. Anderson?
I think almost anything can stop the great C.J. Anderson.
I am taking the Rams. What about you, Justin?
I'm going Saints. I'm going with Mike there. I think it's going to be another shootout game, though. I think the Saints losing Sheldon Rankins last week, I think that's really big. That hurts their run defense big time, and we saw what that Rams running game was doing last week, so I think that's going to be a problem. And I think we're just going to see that. That's what these two teams can do. They're going to be on a fast track in New Orleans. I'm expecting like high 30s. I don't want to go out and predict, a 50-50 game like we saw early in the season between a couple teams, but I think the Saints are going to pull this one out late. I think it's going to be close. Another one of these back and forth games, and I think it's going to go into the high 30s, like 38, 35 or something like that. And I think, and we'll talk about the other game in a second, I think the best thing I'm predicting this weekend is I think they're both going to be really, really good games.
Yeah, I hope the Chiefs game is a blowout. But I think I'm going to call at least 80 points in this game. I think it's like I agree with you. I think it's going to be a shootout. I do want to see the Rams win. I like the Rams more, but I think as of right now at his stage in the career, I want to see Drew Brees get another ring.
I don't think there's really a bad guy in this matchup, unlike the next game we're going to talk about. I think, I think in this one, I would be happy seeing either of these teams get there. I think it would be exciting. I like the way both franchises are run. There's obviously, so many stars at every position when you're looking at it from a fantasy perspective. So it's going to be an exciting one.
Well, speaking of bad guys, let's get to the next game. Patriots at Chiefs play the 6:40 Eastern game. And this is going to be a cold one. The National Weather Service is projecting extremely cold temperatures in Kansas City at Arrowhead. Temperatures could range from negative to 10 degrees, and it could be the coldest game in the stadium's history. So, Mike, if it is that cold, who do you think that favors, the Patriots or the Chiefs?
I really think it favors the team that has three utilizable backs that they have. I mean, the Patriots, they have White, they got Michelle, and then they got Burkhead still. So, I mean, they have more weapons for that type of game, in my opinion. And I think that the defensive side of the ball, they can really just isolate down. I mean, Williams is good, but I don't think he's like, say, Kareem Hunt level good. Like, if it was Kareem Hunt in this game, we'd be in business, but he's not. And so with that said, I feel like the Patriots are probably going to be able to run away with this one. And I don't want to say that.
Yeah, I am pulling for the Chiefs to win by at least 50. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's what I'm hoping. What about you, Justin?
Well, I'll admit right off the start that I'm a Bills fan, so that probably does skew how I'm viewing this because, I've seen the Patriots do so well for so long. I definitely don't want to see them go to another Super Bowl, but For me, the thing here, the weather's definitely going to impact it. That's probably going to lower the scoring. But the Chiefs are very tough at Arrowhead. It's a different defense at Arrowhead. The whole team just plays with a different mindset. And if this game was in New England and we were talking about this sort of, like last week, I might pick the Patriots, even though I don't want to see them win. I might actually pick the Patriots. But with the game being at Arrowhead, I think the Chiefs have the edge. Their defense really improved as the year went on. Like I said, I think they're much tougher at home. And, the cold is going to make it a little more unpredictable, but I think Andy Reid's going to best Belichick here. I think for this one, I'm looking more in the 20s, 27, 24. Like I said, I think it's going to be another close, another exciting game. And I think that's the best we can hope for this weekend. Even if the Patriots somehow pull it out, at least let it be close. There's nothing worse than that Patriots-Chargers game last week where it was over in the first quarter.
Yeah, that was a huge disappointment. And as a Colts fan, I do not want to see Tom Brady win either.
I hope you two are right. I'll just say that. That would be awesome if you two are both right here. That would be great.
I'm calling 45-3 Chiefs. No, it's certainly going to be a very close game. It's going to come down to a last-minute drive, I think, for one of the teams.
Yeah, so that's what we saw in their matchup earlier in the season, right? Where it basically came down to who was going to have the ball last.
Yep, yeah, and that's it. And if the defense can stop them when it counts. Andy Reid also said that Sammy Watkins had no setbacks from last weekend, so he is good to go for this week, so that's good for that Chiefs offense. Last piece of news here, a little bit of hype. Jerry Rice said on Monday on a radio show that Antonio Brown really badly wants to play for the 49ers. So, hype talk, but let's speculate. If AB does get traded to the 49ers, he's still top 5?
Yeah, wherever he goes, he's going to be good. He's still one of the best in the game, one of the best all time. He's playing at an extremely high level. It's crazy because he almost quietly had a huge season this year. It's straight. You're normally used to seeing him put up these monster totals every week, and I don't know if it's because Juju was on the other side of the field and it was also putting up good numbers, or the Steelers weren't sort of succeeding like they normally do, but he had a great season this year. He's still an unbelievable talent. If he went to the 49ers, it would hurt guys like, Pettis and Kittle from a ceiling standpoint, just target-wise, but it would also help the offense score more. They're going to be in scoring position a lot more if they bring in a guy like that in the receiving core. So I think that would offset a little bit of the, target loss for those guys. Overall, Brown going to any team is just going to raise all boats, right? I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think the odds of him being moved, if you had asked me a couple weeks ago, we talked about it on our podcast, I just didn't think there was a chance. I figured at some point in the offseason, they were going to talk to him and it was going to get solved. And, the Steelers normally seem to have a way of getting those things resolved when it's not about money, obviously, with Le'Veon Bell. But now with the way they're talking, there really seems to be a rift between the two sides. It does seem like he's going to get traded. I don't know if it's going to be the 49ers because if Brown wants to go to the 49ers, I think the last thing the Steelers are going to do is grant that wish for him and send him where he wants to go. I think if anything, they would send him to, the Jets or something at that point, let him go to a franchise, or Buffalo. I didn't want to use Buffalo, but I was thinking it in my head. Yeah. I don't see them sending him to, a perfect scenario for him to, a team that's on the rise with a smart offensive mind. I do think, though, if they trade him, it's going to be the NFC. I would have a hard time believing that they would move him somewhere else in the AFC where he could come back and hurt them, often, twice a year or once a year kind of thing.
They want to play him once every 4 years.
Exactly. I would imagine that would be the case. But, I'm doubting that. But a couple weeks ago, I was also doubting that this was actually going to happen. And now it really seems like it's going down that trade road.
Real quick, Mike, before I hand it over to you, we just got a breaking news alert from Sleeper. And Justin, I'm not sure if you saw this one or not. ESPN Panthers reporter David Newton speculates that Cam Newton could sit out all of the 2019 season if he has another shoulder operation. So if he chooses to have another one, he might miss all of next season. So with absolutely no time to think about this, Mike, how do you feel about Christian McCaffrey? Is this going to give him more work, or is he going to take a hit?
I think this will, I mean, looking at what he did this year by comparison, I think he's going to take a huge hit. I mean, I guess it depends on what they do in the offseason as a replacement, but I mean, if they go with their backup, it's not going to be good for Christian McCaffrey. I mean, he's amazing, but I don't like it.
Now, Justin, you have McCaffrey third in your PPR ranks as of right now. If Newton's gone, if you had to make the call today, would that change?
It would really depend who they were going to bring in. If I had to make the call today, he would drop a few spots for sure. I mean, once again, it would be sort of the reverse of what I talked about a minute ago, where the success of the entire offense would be reduced. But I think the volume for McCaffrey might even go up a little bit, because now he's going to be the entire offense at that point. But I think there are some quarterbacks out there this year that they could get and, go out and get and bring in as fill-ins, a guy like Tyrod Taylor, someone like that who could bring in and really keep things together. We've seen him put up decent fantasy numbers in the past. I mean, hopefully they wouldn't go after someone like, Flacco or something like that. But I think they could find someone out on the market who could come in, fill in for a year. It would for sure hurt the, development of guys like DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel, who are guys that I was very excited about going into next season. But as far as McCaffrey goes, I think he would still be in a pretty good spot, because I think he's going to get a ton of volume there regardless.
I'm pretty bummed about a decision I made with DJ Moore last season. I have a keeper league where you can only keep guys that you drafted and you keep them at a 2-round penalty. And I drafted DJ Moore in the 11th, and he wasn't doing anything, so I dropped him. I could have kept him for a 9th this season.
Oh.
We all make those mistakes.
Yep.
In David Johnson's rookie year, I drafted him super late in a keeper league, and I was sitting on him, and Chris Johnson was running away with the job early in that season, if everybody remembers.
Oh, yeah.
I had to make a tough decision. I was going to the playoffs, and I had to make a tough decision on a roster spot, and I was like, well, David Johnson hasn't done anything this year, so I ended up dropping him, and sure enough, it was like 3 weeks later or 2 weeks later, I think, that he ended up getting the starting job, and I could have been keeping him at, same sort of thing, like a 12th rounder or something like that, which would have been unbelievable value.
Yeah, and you could still have him in what, like the 7th, something like that, 6th?
I think it would be even
Ridiculous.
higher. It would be even lower than that, actually. It would be probably in like the 10th or the 9th or something still. So, yeah, we all have those stories, and they don't get any easier to deal with, that's for sure.
Yeah, guys, a little hint when it comes to your draft next season. If you do have leagues where you keep guys at a penalty, don't be afraid to spend that last-round pick on an injured guy. I took Darius Geis with my 16th pick, and now next season I get to have him as my 14th. It's pretty great. Just put him on the IR, pick up another guy, because honestly, who's that 16th round pick going to be anyway, Yeah,
it's a smart move. I did that in a couple leagues this year with Hunter Henry. I tried with Deonta Foreman. That one obviously didn't work out as well, but Henry looks like a pretty good keeper in the late rounds at this point.
Yeah, certainly does. All right, guys. Mike, you ready to talk about Justin's rankings?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I've been looking at this list all day, and I've been kind of curious about a few of these spots, but there's a few that I completely agree with and a couple that I don't agree with.
Well, what would
fire away, gentlemen.
What would fantasy football be if we agreed with every player? So I'm going to talk about quarterbacks first. So the first thing that stuck out to me was you have Kirk Cousins as the quarterback 18. And I wanted to know why, because he did finish this past season as the quarterback 12, so he was still a QB1 technically in what a ton of people thought was a down offensive year for the Vikings. A lot of people think that next season is going to be a better offensive year. Why would that make Kirk Cousins the QB 18?
Well, I sort of talked about it earlier, and I think they are going to continue to run the ball more, and that's what we saw in the second half of the season. We've seen this plague other guys too, guys like Matt Stafford, who for a long time was just killing it based on the fact that he had so much passing volume, and at this point now it's he's not getting that. They've kind of gone to more of a run first approach, and it's really started to affect him. I think with Cousins, if you look at his numbers over the course of the whole season, and sometimes this can be a useful tactic, if you break it up, look at the year in quarters, look at the year in halves, that can give you a better outlook sometimes on actually where a player stands at the end of a season. So I think for Cousins, he's going to have less attempts this year. I think they're going to lean on the running game a lot more on Dalvin Cook, who I mentioned earlier. I think is a great talent, and I think that's more the style Zimmer wants to play. Lean on the defense and, play with that run game. Now, hopefully they go out and they do improve that offensive line. Maybe that would open things up a little bit for them. But if you look at Cousins' numbers over the course of the year, in the first half of the season, that's where he did his damage. In the first 8 games of the year, he was the QB6. In the final 8 games of the year, he was right where I have him ranked next year, the QB 18. That's how much it can change. Now, we saw other things happen. Adam Thielen, who I think we're probably going to talk about. I'm sure you guys will question that ranking that I have for him. Adam Thielen didn't play as well in the second half of the year, but that whole passing game didn't play as well in the second half of the year. And I do think not just the offensive line, but a big part of that is because they are going to run more.
I'm going to cut off your Thielen thoughts right now because I am going to hold you to what you said, and then we're going to get back to him.
All right.
Next thing I want to talk about, Ben Roethlisberger as the quarterback 10. Do you have him still ranked in the top 10 based on Antonio Brown still being a Steeler, still being there next season? If he's traded, say, to 49ers or anybody, is that going to move Roethlisberger down?
Yeah, this is one where the rankings came out about a week and a half ago, I believe.
Yeah, I think I saw 8 days is what the score said.
Yeah, and like I said, at that point, I was still under the assumption they were going to find a way to make amends. Now, not so much. So, Ben had a fantastic season this year, put up, top 5 numbers. Obviously, I think he was the QB2. Looking at it moving forward, though, if Antonio Brown is not there, Ben is going to fall pretty far, and I think he's probably going to be more down, maybe not all the way down in that Cousins range, but a little further down. And that's also, and this bleeds into the Cousins point as well, there's a lot of good quarterbacks. And this is why we always encourage people to play in 2 quarterback leagues or super flex leagues, because there are so many good quarterbacks. When you get into that range, it's hard to start slotting guys. It's, very small projection changes can move a guy up a couple spots. So for Roethlisberger right now, if they manage to solve it with AB, he'll still be low-end QB1 in my rankings. If not, he's going to fall more towards that QB2 range.
All right, Mike, say AB is traded. Who are you taking, Cousins or Big Ben?
Man, I still think I'd take Big Ben. I like Juju Smith. I think Connor's a good enough fit for that offense. I don't think you see a ton of change. I mean, yes, it's Antonio Brown, and that's a huge, huge hit. But, I mean, you've seen time and time again, just anybody can really fill the slot and get things done. I mean, not Antonio Brown caliber, but enough to get the job done.
Don't forget about Jalen Samuels at tight end, too.
Right, absolutely.
All right, let's move to the next guy that caught my eye. Tom Brady as the quarterback 17. So some notable guys that you have him ranked behind. You have him ranked behind Dak Prescott, Mitch Trubisky, and Lamar Jackson. Why so low?
Who's Brady going to be throwing to next year? And I know based on the conversation we had before, and I said I was a Bills fan, and everyone thinks probably that this is just, complete bias. But, I mean, that would be the worst case scenario. If Antonio, he'll never end up there. The Steelers would never do that. But, Edelman was great since he came back from suspension. He was playing at a great clip. But when you look elsewhere in that offense, Gronk might be retired next year. I honestly believe that. I don't know that he's going to be coming back. And if he does, he's a shell of the player that he once was. He's not the same guy. Looking out, Josh Gordon's not coming back. Chris Hogan, Philip Dorsett, I believe both those guys are free agents. So Brady's going to be another year older. The team is going to be smart, and they're going to go out and get someone. Could it be a Golden Tate? Could it be there's going to be a few guys on the free agent market. I imagine New England's probably going to bring in someone. But even if they go out and sign a couple guys, how high can Brady go at this point? I know he's coming off a pretty good performance last week in the playoff game, but over the course of a whole season, I just don't think we're going to see that from him again. I think he's going to have weeks where he pops up, but over the course of a whole season, he can't compete with these other guys. And when you talk about even someone like Lamar Jackson, who isn't the best at passing at the moment, he is still putting up good fantasy numbers because of that rushing ability. And you have to think that the passing will improve a little bit as we go here with a full NFL offseason under his belt. And guys like Prescott, Trubisky, they all run the ball. They all get rushing touchdowns, and they all can boost their days. When they have that bad day, they only throw for 1 touchdown. Maybe they get 40 rushing yards. Maybe they add a rushing score, and that often can put them over a guy like Brady who really can't provide that.
Mike, out of those four guys, we've got Brady, Prescott, Trubisky, and Lamar Jackson. Who would you take?
I think
And once again, guys, we know this is January, right? So
right.
keep that in mind.
I don't think
we know it's January.
I don't think we see Tom Brady next year. I think he wins the Super Bowl this year and retires. But I think the guy that I take out of that group for sure is going to be Lamar Jackson, and just for every reason that he just stated. I mean, give me a rushing quarterback anytime.
You know, I still like Dak the most. It feels weird to say, but especially after his performance to start the season, he was great last year for the most part. But with Amari Cooper, he's just got something working. You know, I really like Dak Prescott next season. I think he's going to be a great late round pick.
Don't discount Michael Gallup, too. I liked Michael Gallup coming out. I think we saw a lot from him down the stretch there. And it seemed like a couple of tight ends were able to do a little bit, even with Jeff Swaim out. We saw Blake Jarwin step up. So I think Dak as a player is limited in his skill set. But from production standpoint, that offense can get it done with the threat of Zeke, with Zeke getting more involved in the passing game now. Dak's going to be a good one here fantasy-wise.
Yeah, I like him. I just don't like him as much as I like Lamar Jackson. That's all.
At this point, when we're talking about guys who are going to be drafted at the very end of the draft, it's kind of splitting hairs at this point. But it certainly will depend on what happens in free agency and the draft. Let's talk about this last quarterback here, Jameis Winston as the quarterback 19. You might have alluded to this changing for you. These rankings were created, I believe, 8 days ago, a little over a week. Does Winston as QB19 change with the Bucs bringing in Bruce Arians, who loves to throw the deep ball?
It will. He's still a very volatile option, right? And, not that long ago, it was probably, a month or maybe a little over a month ago, we were thinking that Winston probably wasn't going to be the starting quarterback in 2019. Then Arians gets hired. Arians likes Winston. They have a working relationship prior to this. He wants to work with Winston. And all of a sudden, Winston has a shot again. But it's still within the realm of possibility that Winston, steps out in that field early in the season, completely craters, and Arians is forced to pull the plug. We've seen Jameis do that in the past, and just, a ton of turnovers and just not being able to get the offense rolling. So that's sort of baked into his projection at the moment. Now, yes, I like the fact that Arians is there, and I do think that gives Jameis the best chance. But I'm also still being mindful that we may just have seen the best of Jameis Winston. There might not be another gear. We keep thinking that, he can. We keep expecting that at some point it's going to happen, and he's surrounded by talent. But, it just might not come about. So what I want to see from him, I want to see in, whether it's OTAs or training camp or all the way to the preseason, I need to see him succeeding on the field, even if it's in practice. I need to hear the positive reports, and you have to, keep in mind that, a lot of that is fluff in the offseason, but, you got to know who to listen to. You got to weed through that and try to figure out, is he actually picking up this offense? Is there a chance that he is going to go out and finally put it all together? If he does, if we hear that as the offseason goes along, I could see him moving over guys like Cousins and Brady, maybe cracking the top 15, but there is still a lot of risk there. And I really think, though, that being said, I think I can already start to see my plan at quarterback next year. And depending where Carson Wentz is taken, where his ADP is going to land, he's going to be a guy that I'm going to target. But I think taking a couple guys like, pairing a Winston and a Trubisky, or Winston and Mayfield, and hoping that you can catch lightning in a bottle. You're not going to get another Mahomes necessarily, but hoping you can catch that guy that could crack the top 5. That's going to be a pretty smart plan, I think, come draft season.
I agree. And you know what? We might have to have Greg Allman on the show again. He's one of the Bucs beat writers that Hoos and I had a little interview with him last season where we talked about Ronald Jones or Peyton Barber. And I am very disappointed to announce that Hoos won that bet with Peyton Barber. I am not a Barber fan. But yeah, maybe we'll have to have him back on the show this summer. Let's move to running backs here, though. I want to kick it off. Melvin Gordon, your RB5. I 100% agree with this. Listeners of the show know that I am a huge fan of Melvin Gordon. I know a lot of people, a lot of analysts are probably going to have Gordon lower than 5, but I just want to say I agree. Mike, what about you?
It's sad because I feel like 5 is almost too low, right?
Right.
But
It's weird.
at the same time, there's four other. I mean, I can just think the running back game is strong right now. And so if Melvin Gordon is in your top five, or is your five exactly, that's pretty amazing to think of who else is on that list, So I'm actually right there with you. I think Melvin Gordon, 5, 6, 7, somewhere in there for sure.
Yep. Speaking of 7, you've got Joe Mixon as your RB7. Oh, and guys, we're talking about PPR rankings, not standard, where we do almost everything in PPR. PPR, you have him as the RB7. This one's interesting to me. Why Mixon over guys like Nick Chubb, James Conner, and David Johnson, who are right behind him?
This is one I might have to change. I mean, I batted it around a lot. At the time, another situation where I didn't know who the Cardinals were hiring at that point, so that sort of kept DJ in check a little bit. Connor, I like. I also think Samuels was good enough late in the year that they're probably going to find a way to use him a little bit more. That might take a little of the shine off Connor. Chubb's the one who I think is probably going to pass Mixon. I really like Nick Chubb, and I was just very impressed by what Mixon did this year. He was a top 10 running back in all formats, and he was playing in just a terrible offense, right? The Bengals were so bad. They had a backup quarterback. They had a third-string tight end most of the year. We saw A.J. Green miss several weeks, and through it all, just Mixon kept producing. So if they can make a few improvements, if they're getting Green and Dalton back, it's hard to drop Mixon very far, in that top 10 when he produced like that, given the circumstances last year.
Does it feel like Mixon was top 10? I mean, he was, but does it feel like it?
No, because you were never watching Bengals games, because why would you do that to yourself?
Yeah, I guess that's 100% true.
As an owner,
I didn't realize he had 8 touchdowns.
As an owner of him, man, he lit it up all the time. It just seemed like he was always consistent. I liked having Mixon this year.
You know what? Maybe it's because I didn't have Mixon on any of my 12 teams.
That also could do it.
And he missed 2 games, too.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that. Maybe I'll look more into Joe Mixon. Le'Veon Bell, the RB8. Is there a team that he could sign with that would move him into the top 5?
I don't think so. I mean, a player coming back from a year off really scares me. It just does. Is he in shape? Is he at a higher risk of having a soft tissue injury? We see that happen a lot with guys that miss time, that have long layoffs. Is he going to be motivated? He's going to get paid this offseason. Does that change things at this point? We're talking about a player that was willing to sit out an entire season. I just don't know where his head's at this point. And there's a possibility. I mean, the Steelers offense could be a big part of Bell's success. I think he's a good running back, but we've seen several backs produce in that Steelers offense, going back to D'Angelo Williams, obviously Connor, like I mentioned, Samuels. All those guys could put up RB1 numbers. Yeah, like we've seen guys step into that offense and just deliver. We haven't seen Bell put up RB1 numbers anywhere but Pittsburgh. So I don't really think he's going to go to the Colts, which I think would be, that might be the one place, but I think Chris Ballard's too smart to spend big bucks and bring in Le'Veon Bell. So if he goes to a team like the Jets, are you going to trust an Adam Gase running back? I certainly don't think I am. If he goes to a team like the Texans, that offensive line still is not very good. They improved a little bit as the year went on, but they're still not that good. So I think there's just a much greater chance that we see Bell come back and slip and fall into more of the RB2 range versus he comes back and goes right back to putting up the elite production that we saw from him.
As much as I would absolutely love to have Le'Veon Bell on the Colts, and they can, it's weird, they can afford both him and Antonio Brown if they wanted to. They've got that much cap space. As much as I would love to have him, I got to admit, I was wrong about Marlon Mack. I was saying last offseason that I don't think Marlon Mack is the answer for the Colts at running back. And looks like I was wrong. I think I saw this stat that the second half of the season, he was had the 4th most rushing yards in the second half of the season, I think. He was just killing it.
The Colts essentially are becoming, perception-wise, they're becoming what the Cowboys were a couple of years ago. Their offensive line has come together, and I think almost anyone you put behind that offensive line now, the way they were the second half of the year when they're all healthy, they're going to produce. And I think we saw a different version of Mack. He was more decisive this season. He improved his game. And we see that happen. Yeah, exactly. We see that happen sometimes, right? Le'Veon Bell being a good example. In his first year to his second year, he really made a great stride. He really took things more seriously. Hopefully, we see him come back with that kind of motivation after the year off. Mac, though, is a guy I'm going to be all over next year in drafts, assuming the Colts don't go out and get somebody.
Man, Chris Ballard killed that draft for the Colts last season. I mean, Quentin Nelson, who, if it weren't for Barkley's great season, could be Offensive Rookie of the Year. That's how good he was for offensive guard for the Colts last season. And then Darius Leonard was amazing. Ballard knows what he's doing.
Absolutely. I think one of the best in the game, and we're seeing it. They're set up now for success many years to come.
And Mike, I'll kick this last question to you. Where would you like to see Bell go? If you were making the call for him?
I think Philadelphia. I mean, I think that's a team that he could just slide right on in and actually produce possibly top 5. Although this was one of the ones I disagreed with him on was the RB8, and it's crazy because with the same argument. I mean, I'm like, in Pittsburgh, you could drive a semi through the holes. I said this just last week. I mean, they're giant. And you can I think I would probably be a good running back in Pittsburgh, and that probably is a terrible scenario for Pittsburgh fans. But I mean, really, I think that a guy could be successful because all that you really have to do is just be good at running. So for him to go to a different system or anything like that, I mean, he'll show his true colors. He'll show if he is really this elite back or if it was just another one of the guys that had a good flash and caught Tomlin's eye.
Last running back here, Leonard Fournette. You have him as the RB27, and we don't need to go into this. Just real quick, why so low?
Well, this was another one where it was before they reportedly kissed and made up and everything, right? Apparently, Tom Coughlin sat down with Fournette, and now everything's okay. That will bump him back up a little bit, but for me, he's going to have a low rank regardless, and it's just injury-based. I just don't have any confidence that he's going to make it through a 16-game schedule at this point, or even anything close to that. We just keep seeing these lower body injuries pop up and take him down. And, I don't know much about the Jaguars offense at this point. They don't have a quarterback right now. And you could probably argue that they haven't had a quarterback the last couple of years, but it seems like that team is in a strange amount of turmoil, right? Like from what they were 2 years ago when they were on the verge of what seemed to be a Super Bowl contender. And last year, it was all falling apart. You have guys on defense like Jalen Ramsey, going off and sort of doing their own thing and making crazy comments. And on offense, you just don't have a quarterback. And then you have some injuries in the offensive line, and Fournette gets hurt, and the whole thing falls apart. So I think the rift might be squashed between him and the team for now, but there has to be resentment there. And it's got to be from both sides, I would think. And I can't see a scenario where I'm going to trust him as my RB1. So he's going to fall into that RB2 range. Maybe he'll sneak into the teens, if we start to get some positive reports throughout the offseason. But, I mean, are you guys going to trust Fournette at this point after what he's done this year and even dating back to last year with the injuries?
I've never had any shares of Leonard Fournette, and that is not going to change.
Were you a heavy Fournette owner this year by chance?
I wasn't, no. I actually haven't had a ton of shares of him either. I wanted to get him this year, so going into the season, I thought he was going to have a good year, obviously, especially coming off the season they had prior to that, and assuming that they were going to be a team that was going to win a lot of games and be able to lean on the run. And the guy who ended up doing that was the guy we talked about before, Melvin Gordon, right? Melvin Gordon, the Chargers were winning games. They were playing good defense. They took the pressure off Phillip Rivers, who's still a pretty good quarterback, but they took the pressure off him and just let Gordon go crazy, and he put up huge stats because of it. He got hurt late in the year, but he's just not a guy that has an extensive injury history. You look at Fournette, this goes all the way back to college with him. Right. He's just a guy seems like it's just going to plague him the rest of his career. And we've seen it happen where sometimes guys, it seems like they're injury prone. Turns out that they're not. But this one with Fournette, it's really hard for me to trust him.
Yeah, see, the only reason I ask is because as an owner of him in like a lot of leagues this year, just because, I mean, to me, the draft value that you were getting out of a guy with that kind of an expectation was just almost too good to be true, and it was too good to be true at the end of the year. You definitely didn't get the return of investment on that one at all. So, I don't know, with this guy, I just he has why so low, and I'm like, why so high? Because that's how burnt on Leonard Fournette I am right now. I'm like, no, even if he's coming off 32nd on the board, I'm out. I'm not doing this. I'm out with this guy.
Let's real quick. Is Leonard Fournette's ADP gonna be in the second round next season?
I don't think he will. I think we'll see him mid-third, maybe early fourth.
It'll probably strongly depend on what we hear out of Jags camp and, what they decide to do if they go out and get another running back. TJ Yeldon's a free agent, so are they going to go out and get somebody that could potentially, we saw them with Carlos Hyde. Are they going to sort of stock that backfield knowing full well that Fournette's probably going to get hurt at some point and they're going to need other guys to be there? But I think he's probably going to fall at best, maybe late second, but I feel like he's more of a third. I hope fourth. If he reaches the fourth, then we can start to talk.
Would you take him as your RB2?
I don't think I would, unless if he's going very late and I'm, and I decided to go to other positions early. I think tight end's a position where I think some of those elite guys are going to go a little higher than people expect or higher than they've gone in previous years. If I decide to do that, then maybe if Fournette's there in the fourth round, I would go after him. But it's just we're gonna have to hear more. We're gonna have to see more from him, and even then, I still believe we're gonna go into the season. You're gonna see him break down.
Let's move into wide receivers, and we'll pick up the pace a little bit here, running a little low on time, but we'll take the time for this first player because I'm going to hold you to what you said about the Vikings want to run the ball and they need to improve the offensive line so they can run the ball and then focus on defense so that they can control the clock. You have Adam Thielen as your wide receiver 10, and he was basically at best a wide receiver 2 or 3 for the whole second half of the season. He was phenomenal for the first half. Nobody's going to argue that. 8 straight 100-yard games to start the season, which was the NFL record, I believe, if you're starting the season for consecutive 100-yard games. That's why he finished as the wide receiver 7. The second half of the season, he was hard to own. Why do you have him as your wide receiver 10?
I think two things jump out to me with Thielen, and maybe Thielen is my blind spot because he is a guy that I owned in a lot of places this year. But, I think he was playing through injury in the second half of the year. It's something the broadcasters covering the games were talking about. It's something that sort of popped up several times late in the season. He had this calf issue. He was playing through it. I think that took away some of his explosiveness, some of his quickness. And I do think he's going to be affected by the move to the more run-heavy offense, which now we've seemed to have talked about in every segment so far here. But I think he's still going to be productive. And he was the wide receiver 7 in PPR on the season. The wide receiver 10, which is where I have him ranked this year, was 40 fantasy points behind him. So if you take 20 receptions and 200 yards from Thielen's 2018 totals, there you go. Now he's down to the wide receiver 10. I think that's the thing that's going to happen. I think the touchdowns are still going to stay high where they were. I think he had 9. And I think that's just going to be because the offense is going to continue to be successful. So I think they're going to have scoring opportunities. I can't see Thielen falling that far off. And I do think the injury was a big part of that second half drop off.
All right, well, I guess I can accept that, even though you seemed very pro-run for the Vikings. Thielen is going to be great. I wanted to make sure we talked about him, especially when you said if you break the season down into halves. And I was like, well, Thielen was split basically down the middle.
It's definitely
8 games.
One of the things that helps him, though, is from the passing game standpoint with them, there's just not that many guys to throw to. It's Thielen and it's Diggs, and they see all of the volume, essentially. Kyle Rudolph's completely dropped off out of that offense.
Why did they not use Kyle Rudolph?
I wonder the same myself. I don't have an answer for you there. I think they should, and I think if they're going to run the ball a little more, we did see a little bit more usage for Rudolph maybe late in the season, but I don't think it's going to be enough. I think they're going to use their tight ends. They're going to go big there, and they know that they have 2 excellent receivers that are going to be able to win, that are going to be able to get open, and those guys are just going to continue to see a ton of volume, barring, the odd Aldrick Robinson touchdown that we saw a few times this year.
Well, and Kyle Rudolph's only a couple seasons removed from being the number 2 tight end in fantasy. He is a very, very good tight end, and Kirk Cousins, in his 3 years in Washington, threw to his tight ends more than his wide receiver 1 for 3 straight seasons. So that was my biggest miss of the fantasy season last year. I thought Kyle Rudolph was going to be top 5, and he wasn't even close.
Yeah, if anything, you think they'd still be using him around the red zone. He's the
Exactly.
red zone reindeer, right? And he just is not even being used there anymore.
No, not even close. Anyways, this is going to get me worked up talking about this, especially now that I live up here in Vikings country. Let's talk about my team. T.Y. Hilton, wide receiver 17. It seems low to me, but I could have that Colts fan bias going on over here. Why is he outside your top 12?
I totally understand you feeling like it's all. I like Hilton too. He was great with Luck back in the lineup. We talked about the offensive line being fantastic, giving Luck more time and everything like that. The question I have is, who would you like me to put over him? Because if you look at the guys that are just above him, I mean, Stephon Diggs caught 102 balls this year. I think that's going to drop off, but we're talking about PPR, and Hilton is never going to be a guy that's going to catch 90 balls in a season, right? Like, I don't think he's going to get back to that. I don't think he's going to get to that. I think he's going to stay in that sort of 70 range, and he's more of a player's going to make plays downfield. You have Robert Woods, caught 86 balls. Once again, that's significantly more, 10 more, double digits more than Hilton. Woods had a great season this year. Edelman was playing at a fantastic pace. If you take his stats from the final 12 games, he missed the first 4 with the suspension. If you take his stats from that and pace them out, 99 catches, over 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns there. Tough to move him any lower. Amari Cooper found new life in Dallas. I mean, then you start to look at guys like A.J. Green and Mike Evans, and I have a hard time putting Hilton over any of them. So really, that range of guys, it's all going to be pretty close. And it's going to be tough for me to move a guy like Hilton, who is more of, a deep threat. He's not just a deep threat, but he is more a guy who's going to make plays downfield. Unless you tell me that, if you want to tell me a story that he's going to score a ton of touchdowns, maybe it could happen in that offense. We saw Ebron step up and have a ton of touchdowns this year for them. Could it be Hilton next year? Maybe, but touchdowns are hard to predict, and he doesn't have any more than 7 in a season. So hard to project, him having 10 or something like that in a year.
I would take T.Y. over Cooper, Edelman, and I think Woods. Maybe Diggs, but I'm not quite sure. What about you, Mike? I'm looking at your rankings right now, Justin. Is there anybody, Mike, that you would take Hilton over? Anybody in front of him, that is.
This is one of them that I agreed on just because, it's kind of like the Melvin Gordon factor. Melvin Gordon shouldn't be number 5. He should be number 1. The guy's a number 1 caliber player. But there's just too many good people ahead of him, and, the numbers don't lie. He's not going to have that reception season. He's amazing, and he can do a lot with it, but I feel like that's probably going to be about where he lands.
T.Y. did have 91 catches in 2016, though, by the way. when he won the receiving title.
We'll see. You have to think too that they're going to go out and get another receiving weapon. And,
they have to.
They have to. They can't.
Yeah.
Or a guy like Deion Kane. Maybe he missed his rookie season. Maybe he's a guy that could step in and do something for them there. But they need to find another receiving threat. They can't go into another season just relying on the tight ends to really pick up all the slack there.
Yeah, with Chester Rogers and Dontrell Inman and injured Ryan Grant, and yeah. It wasn't great. I was just happy the Colts made the playoffs, honestly. After starting 1-5, that was a great end to the season. Last wide receiver here, Robbie Anderson. You've got him as your wide receiver 24. Hoos and I really, really like Robbie Anderson a lot. He is, to us, he's a wide receiver 1 talent. That's how good this guy is. Now, for fantasy, he hasn't been a wide receiver 1 for a whole season, but he is that talented as a wide receiver. I like him ranked in the top 24. I think the overall fantasy consensus is going to have him lower. What do you say to those guys who think he should be lower?
Well, I think last week, I think I was a lot more excited about him than I am right now that Adam Gase is the coach there. Gase has a terrible history with his skill position players. I really am worried that he's going to be the next guy to fall victim to sort of the usage problems that some of those skill position guys have had playing for Gase. Some of them have seen limited touches. Gase ran some of the guys right out of town, right? J.J., Jarvis Landry, they were huge parts of that Miami offense, and then were completely gone in the blink of an eye. It just seemed like they butted heads with Gase there. Anderson also isn't exactly squeaky clean off the field, right? He's had some off-field incidents. So I worry that Gase either, won't like him or just will decide that the best course of action isn't to target him heavily. And that was a big reason for Anderson coming on late in the year. And boy, was he fantastic during the fantasy playoffs. He definitely helped me make it to a couple championships. But I really worry that, we're going to see a guy like Quincy Enunwa come back healthy. We're going to see them maybe go out and get a running back, draft a guy, or sign somebody, I would assume. That's another situation that could take away targets from him. And late in the year, those targets were key for Anderson. He was establishing a connection with Sam Darnold there. So I'm a little bit worried that that's just not going to be in the cards with Gase under center. So I think he is probably going to drop a little bit for me now too. That being said, absolutely. Does he have wide receiver 1 upside? For sure. We've seen in 2017, he put up top 20 numbers, and then late this year brought it together again. So he disappointed early in the season this year, put it together late. That makes him another guy that's going to be, I write a column every year before the season, risky picks that you can gamble on. He seems like a perfect guy for that article because he could come in and put you over the top, or he could come in and give you absolutely nothing from whatever round you draft him in.
And this is another one where I just kind of completely agree with the whole situation. I mean, Adam Gase just doesn't see, the look on his face in that interview almost says it all about how I feel about his coaching style. Just that deer in the headlights look. He has no idea what's going on. He just doesn't seem to succeed as a coach to me.
I don't even know where to begin with that press conference. I don't know if we should talk about it. It was one of the strangest, and we've seen some bizarre ones. We've seen some coaches lose their cool and things like that. I don't even know if I can come up with an explanation for what was causing him to behave that way. The twitches, the eyes, it was very bizarre.
Yeah. It was like it was his first time in a press conference.
Yeah.
All right, let's take to tight ends. First one here, George Kittle. You've got him as your tight end 2 ahead of Zach Ertz in PPR. Do you think Kittle continues his dominance with a new quarterback, as in with Jimmy Garoppolo and not Nick Mullins?
I do. I think he's going to continue to develop. I think he could even challenge Kelsey for the tight end crown. That's how good he is. We saw the season he had this year. It was fantastic. If he can get that touchdown total up, he's right there with Kelsey. Ertz is going to be great too, but I think Dallas Goedert's going to earn a bigger role moving forward, and maybe the Eagles go out and invest in another receiving weapon for Wentz. Golden Tate's probably going to leave him free agency now. I think they would be wise to go out and get someone else and, help Wentz even more moving forward. So, even if someone like Antonio Brown happens to show up, I think that is going to, increase the chance that Kittle gets that big touchdown number that he could get up maybe even to double digits next season. So I think Kyle Shanahan is a smart guy, and he knows what he has in Kittle, and I think he's going to feed him.
Is George Kittle the fastest tight end in football? It seems like he breaks one of those 70-yard plays every single game. That dude is quick.
And big, and maybe the new Gronk, as much as, I really feel like Gronk's sort of on the decline and, maybe near the end here. I think Kittle's going to step in and fill that role. And Kelsey's a very similar player too. Those guys are just perfect tight ends.
Yeah, they're great. Eric Ebron, you've got him as your tight end 4, and you have Jack Doyle down there at tight end 17. As a Colts fan, I loved the signing of Eric Ebron, and I especially loved his breakout season this year. But Doyle's always been heavily involved in the offense, and that's when he's healthy, which he wasn't for most of this season. So you've got him as your tight end 4. Mike, do you think he should be that high with Doyle being healthy next season, or would you have him a little bit lower?
I think I'd actually have him a little bit higher. I think Jack Doyle is one of my guys that I think comes back with a vengeance next year. I like Eric Ebron, and I think he was getting those targets.
I'm saying, would you have Ebron higher or lower?
I would have him lower. Ebron lower.
Okay.
Sure.
I was going to say, what, you're putting Ebron ahead of Ertz?
Yeah, no. I would put Jack Doyle a little higher, and I'd put Ebron a little lower. I think that with Doyle back, you're going to see him start. I think they really had a connection, him and Luck.
Maybe both closer to the 8 to 12 range?
Yeah, somewhere in there. Both of them, too. I think they can both be productive tight ends.
It seems like a wide split to me. So, Justin, why Eric Ebron at 4 and Doyle at 17? Because Doyle's always been involved.
Doyle could move up a little more. It's going to depend on, we talked about this earlier as well, it's going to depend on what they do in that receiving core if they bring someone in. If they don't, those tight ends really serve. Ebron's kind of like the second receiver, and, Doyle would then come in and be the tight end there, or, they would swap week to week kind of thing. I really, when you look at the guys around him, he's right in the mix with, O.J. Howard, Hunter Henry, David Njoku. It's very tight between all of them. I could see those guys jumping him in the rankings. That's probably going to shift. And you mentioned before, we're in January here. I'm going to update these rankings every month. I'm going to update these rankings every time big news happens, a trade, a signing, whatever. So there's a long way to go. But Ebron right now, even when Doyle came back midseason, and I was one of the people who thought, okay, Doyle's back now, we're going to have to discount Ebron. And I even traded Ebron away. I think I even dropped him in one league, to be honest, at one point, because I had another good tight end. And then he just kept producing. He just kept putting up touchdowns. So I'm not so sure that he's just going to fade into the distance unless they go out and get a receiver who can take on some of that work, maybe be a red zone threat for them.
Love it. Last guy I want to talk about, Jimmy Graham at tight end 20. Once again, a big I told you so to all the Jimmy Graham believers out there who didn't believe me. It's the same story every year when Aaron Rodgers gets a new tight end, and we've heard it for, 3 or 4 straight tight ends now. We heard it with Martellus Bennett. Oh, he's never had a tight end like Martellus Bennett. He's never had a tight end like Jared Cook. He's never had a tight end like Jimmy Graham. Well, he never uses them. I love this ranking right here, Jimmy Graham at 20, someone I'm going to stay away from next year, and I am assuming a lot of people are going to as well. Mike, do you think he should be at tight end 20, or should he at least be drafted?
I mean, Aaron Rodgers has never really had a guy like Jimmy Graham to throw to in the red zone, though, Chris. So, no, I'm with you 100%. I mean, I think I might have been one of the guys who was saying something to the effect that I do like Jimmy Graham going this year. Just because, I mean, he does seem to be like such a target hog and a target monster. But I feel like actually, I mean, he could, 20 is a bit low for me. I mean, maybe 12, 15, somewhere in there for me.
Yeah, I love it, Justin. I love having him that low. Well, that's going to be it for talking about the rankings, guys. And that's going to be it for the show. A huge thank you to you, Justin Boone, for being on the show today. Justin, why don't you tell all the listeners where they can find you and support you?
You can find all my content by downloading the Score app. You can follow me on Twitter at Justin Boone. I tweet a lot of the stuff out there as well. You can also hit me up with questions, off-season questions, playoff questions, whatever. And you can subscribe to the Score Fantasy Football Podcast. I host that. We're going to be running episodes all through the off-season, and we just did an early look at the top prospects in this year's draft. This week we're looking at the players, are going to be coming off serious injuries, what their timetables look like. So as I mentioned off the top, January, February, you can do a lot of fantasy research at this point, and we're going to keep cranking out stuff that's going to help you win come the season.
And speaking of doing it year round, congratulations on your promotion to doing fantasy full time.
Thanks. Yeah, that was a big one before the season last year. I've been, I was sort of double dipping. I was running the NFL team at the Score and taking care of that while trying to do the fantasy stuff on the side. So this was the first season where I was able to just focus on fantasy, and it's been great. And now in the off season, it's going to be fantastic. We've already put out a ton of content here, and I'm looking forward to putting it out all off season long.
Happy for you, man. That's great.
Appreciate it.
Well, guys, you can also follow us on Twitter at Sleeper Show. I'm on there at Prof_Chris SW. Mike is on there at Dirty Jobs 21. You can find us on the Sleeper app at Sleeper Wire, Professor Chris, and Dirty Jobs. Follow us on Facebook. You can find our group on there. It is not the Sleeper Wire Facebook page. It is called the Sleeper Wire Fantasy Football Club. And then on Instagram, Professor Chris SW and Dirty_Jobs_ Mike, where you can see all the pictures that he posts of his disgusting job. See why we call him Dirty Jobs. All right, guys, thanks for listening in. Justin, thanks again for joining us this week. Everybody else, we'll catch you next time.